all you have written right here, I see, is giant hardware store skeleton.
Yes. So I'm not a person with a lot of material desires. I am a Buddhist monk. No, I just don't like, what's it called? My tastes are very cheap, and I just tend to not have a lot of things that I really want.
Yeah, we've talked. I don't know if we've even talked about this on the show before. We've talked about it off mic, where you were using headphones that were literally falling apart for like years. And it was only recently when you got new headphones, but they were like literally you had to like piece them together every time you wanted to use them, basically.
Yeah.
So you get one thing and you like it forever, as long as you can.
Yeah, I have shirts that I know are from 2016 and earlier because, first of all, I was a very different size person back then, but also because it has the like Bernie for President 2016 elections shirts that I still have my regular rotation.
How'd that go? How'd that turn out?
I have an updated 2020 shirt as well.
Yeah, okay.
So yeah,
for his re-election. Okay,
yeah, for his re-election campaign. But like, what it means is that like I only stopped using those headphones when they literally could not be used anymore, and I just don't buy things because I feel physical pain when I spend money.
Right. That's an envious trait. I wish I had that trait, to be honest with you. I feel joy when I see a nice brown box come to my door that says Amazon on it. I'm like, ooh, what did I order? I forgot.
Now, I say all that, but I do have one strong material desire. And now that we have a garage, I feel like I must have it at some point.
All right.
Do you remember the meme?
Is it a car? Because cars usually go in garages.
I have lived in 2 houses in my life, and I have never seen a garage that is used for storing cars.
Cars go outside. Junks go in garage.
Yeah. It's the shed. The shed is now the garage. But the thing that I always have desired is the giant hardware store skeleton. Now, this was a meme for a few years, but it's like a Halloween decoration that is a human skeleton, but is like 12 feet tall.
It's a 12-foot tall skeleton that people. I don't know why they started selling it. Could you imagine? Do you know whose idea that was?
Cocaine.
Like whose idea was like, we're gonna make some Halloween decorations, and they're like, all right, cool, some skeletons.
Yeah, it's because you're misinterpreting the meeting. The meeting went more like this. All right, I've got the best idea for a Halloween decoration.
Oh, guys, I got an idea. Ooh. We're going to have skeleton. Oh, you mean we're going to have a bunch of little skeletons? No, we're going to have skeleton.
Big.
Capital S, skeleton.
Yeah.
Big one.
It reminds me of when there was that author who I think was like from Europe or something where they don't really have Halloween and saw like that house covered in skeleton decorations and was like, this is such a rude thing. It's a reminder of our deaths. And everyone just like memed on it for like a year. Anyways, I want to have a giant hardware store skeleton.
Who doesn't? It's great. I want it. Emily and I have a house now too, and we've not had the house long enough for Halloween to pass us by. But no, hold on. When you say you want it, do you mean as a Halloween decoration or as an all the time decoration?
Listen, it's socially acceptable at Halloween time, so maybe for the rest of the year it becomes a backyard skeleton. But
look, I'm not judging at all. We have a neighbor somewhere in our neighborhood that has a dragon outside of their door, like a dragon statue, 24/7, always year round.
Now, what if because the holiday season sort of blends together because we don't have Thanksgiving between them? What if I have the Halloween skeleton and then on November 1st, I put a Santa hat on the skeleton and then I can leave it up till New Year's at least?
That's what they do with the dragon.
And I can hang up Christmas lights on the skeleton.
They put little hats on the dragon. That's what they do. They're like, back in March, they put a little leprechaun hat on the dragon.
Oh my God. That reminds me of another thing that happened when I was a teenager. A few of my friends did this. I was ancillary to this for legal reasons. So we had a person in the neighborhood, in our sort of suburban neighborhood, who had a garden gnome that we used to make fun of a lot, especially when we were enjoying cannabis. So a couple of my friends came to the conclusion that, you know what we need to do is we need to kidnap the gnome. And so we ended up kidnapping the gnome.
Okay.
But we weren't just satisfied to just steal somebody's lawn ornament. That would be too basic.
Right.
So we orchestrated orchestrated like a ransom where we we started sending like pictures to the house of like
oh my god.
in like
wait, hold on, like you printed out pictures and sent them to the house?
This was still kind of in the days where you could easily get a photo, like a thing where you take it to the mall and get it.
But that's still so much work.
I know
to do that.
We like for exactly 1 year, we would send at least once a month, because it then evolved from like ransom to like sort of a flat Stanley situation, where we just found funny places where we could put the gnome and take pictures.
Ooh, the gnome is in France now. Ooh.
But eventually, exactly 1 year to the day, we did return it.
That's amazing. Did you ever get a response at all from that person? No,
never.
Didn't care.
I just hope that we made somebody's life a little bit more magical.
They do not negotiate with kidnappers, all right? That was their policy.
That was a very fun little story from my teenage years that I feel like that's just good-natured pranking, but I don't know. Maybe that person really loved their gnome and was really mad that they didn't have their
stealing.
It is also a crime.
Yeah. So anyway,
this is a podcast called It's Probably Not Aliens.
Aliens did not abduct the gnome.
Aliens
did Tristan.
Yeah, well, it wasn't me.
It wasn't Tristan.
I will say, for more than legal reasons, I was more ancillary to this. There was some other friends who were, this was mainly their thing. I was more a witness to this event.
Yeah. And their names were Gristin Blonson.
Nope.
That was one of them. All right.
They know who they are. And they probably don't listen to this podcast, but yeah.
Probably not. This is a podcast, by the way, where we debunk ancient aliens and ancient astronaut theory and learn about cool history behind people, places, things, cultures. And my name is Scott Nicewander. I'm the host of the show that doesn't know anything.
Nice.
I'm here to learn. I'm here to grow my big noggin so that it's the size of a giant hardware store skeleton.
My name's Tristan Johnson, skeleton owner and future big skeleton owner. And I am the one whomst does the research. Gnome kidnapper,
allegedly
involved with gnomish trafficking. But yeah, but today this show is about ancient aliens, ancient astronaut theory, pseudo-history, pseudo-archaeology, and that last one is definitely the one we are going to lean on today because we're going to talk about a big part of pseudo-archaeology and a big part of this episode of Ancient Aliens that we are sort of sifting our way through because this episode was very concerned with giants.
Now, can I take a guess here? Because I really don't know anything. People underestimate how little I know when I come into these episodes. I don't look at Tristan's outline before we start recording, basically. I'm going to take a guess. Are we talking about people finding actual, quote unquote, actual giant skeletons and believing that there were giants in the past?
Yes.
Very fun. All right, hit me with it. What's the story?
So the story that we're beginning with to sort of break into the story about everybody claiming that there's giants hiding all over the place is a large part of the episode, which is revolving around a place in Nevada called Lovelock Cave.
All right.
According to ancient astronaut believers, or what cranks, according to the cranks, Lovelock Cave in Nevada is a place where there's a lot of giant skeletons that everybody knows that there's these massive skeletons. And they show in Ancient Aliens, they show like a normal picture of somebody's jaw next to like the jaw of the giant, and the jaw is humongous.
Big giant. Yeah. Big giant jaw.
And that this was discovered in sort of early 20th century. But there were local legends around Lovelock that said that there was a tribe of giants with red hair that were exterminated by the Paiute people who live in that region, and that they were cannibalistic giants that were shepherded into a cave and then set on fire and died. And everyone was like, "Oh, that's just a myth about that cave." Fast forward, people are.
I wish I had a fast forward sound effect. I don't have one. Tristan, I have a go back in time sound effect, but I don't have a fast forward one.
Just play it in reverse.
Here's my flashback sound effect.
Okay.
But I don't have a fast forward one, sorry.
So flash forward, there's a group of miners who are going into this cave to mine guano, which for anyone,
bat poop.
It's bird poop and bat poop.
Oh yeah, I always think it's just bats. I don't know why.
Yeah, well, because of Ace Ventura 2, probably.
Probably, that's it.
But basically, guano before the invention of the Haber-Bosch process was one of the easiest ways for us to get nitrogen, which was used to make fertilizer, which is used for making food that we eat. So guano was a big deal. People fought wars over these things. So they were mining the guano out of this cave in the year 1911, I want to say, when they found, after digging around and telling some around, artifacts, rubbish heaps, and apparently human remains with red hair, and they were bone boys. They were big, giant skeletons. They were then taken back to the ones that survived were taken back to the museum, where they were held by the evil Illuminatus of the Nevada Historical Society and the evil overlords of the University of California.
Oh no.
And they keep these bones not on display because they don't want people to find out the truth.
No, people
that they were giants.
Out. There were giants back in the day.
And where do giants come from? Well, ancient astronaut theorists believe
Nevada.
That ancient aliens mutated early human DNA and usually made hybrids with humans, and that led to the creation of giants, but also to chimeras. And they pointed to things like centaurs and satyrs and like chimeras as all signs of ancient aliens like messing with human genes to make monsters. So
and this we've talked about this in a previous episode before about just this concept, right? With the Nephilim.
The Nephilim are the biblical giants that we did talk about in the past.
But yeah,
the monsters and mutants thing we also talked about briefly when we were talking about the Serapeum of Saqqara.
Mm-hmm. And then, but now this is this feels like physical evidence. We have giant bones. We have giant skulls. Or do we? I mean, they're not. I can't access them, right? They're being hidden from me, so I don't know the truth.
Mm-hmm. So that's what we're going to talk about today.
I'm excited. Hit me. We've talked about so many times on the show that my head is proportionally small to my body, I feel.
Mm-hmm.
And so if I can learn what these giants did to have big heads, because you've just told me that we found like skulls. Did we find full bodies? I don't even care. We found big skulls. My hope is that they have big heads and regular sized bodies. And I got to know what they did.
They looked like big head mode in GoldenEye or something.
We got the big head cheat code in Tony Hawk Pro Skater 4. Let's hit it. I want to know how they did it.
Okay. Well, let's start by going to Lovelock Cave and figuring out what this place is. So Lovelock is a limestone cave that is close to the shores of a place called Humboldt Lake and has been formed by water erosion over the years. There's evidence of human habitation around this cave dating back about 4,000 years, if you look at the artifacts that were discovered by these guano miners. The culture there probably lived in that cave for something like 3,000 years and left tons of artifacts behind. Things like baskets, the most famous being amongst real archaeologists, these famous duck decoys that were made from special fibers and sagebrush, and also sandals made of tulle or tulle.
Okay.
The Paiutes at some point either defeated, displaced, or just moved into the region where the Lovelock culture used to be and took it over. Either they showed up after the Lovelock culture had already petered out, or they defeated them and displaced them. And they continued to use the exterior part of the cave until 1829, when white people moved into the region and basically kicked them out.
Oh, white people. Come on.
Yeah. But in 1911, the guano miners then were starting to dig through the big guano deposits. In 1912, an anthropologist by the name of Lewin L. Loud, that's a very Welsh and very L-heavy name.
A very L-forward name. Yeah.
Discovered over 10,000 artifacts from a rubbish heap from the civilization that had lived in this cave for 3,000 years.
So this was just buried under all the guano?
Yeah, they under the guano, they had found that there was a civilization that had lived in this cave for thousands of years, and they found tons and tons of stuff in their garbage heaps and random artifacts all over the place. Most of them find them in the walls that had not been carved out by miners.
Okay, that makes sense. So we've got this this newly discovered sort of society.
Mm-hmm.
That's interesting. I mean, they don't live there now, but they had.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Right?
Now,
gotta learn more about them.
Now, very quickly, but the thing is that by the time they had cleared out this cave, there were already myths that there were giants and the possibility that the remains of giants inside. It's right now already a big internet claim that there's these cannibalistic red-haired giants in Nevada, and that they get moved from one website to the other, and your very internet type claims. But the only evidence they have for their existence comes from a very interesting source, which is this book that came out in 1883 by a woman by the name of Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins.
All right. What'd Sarah have to say?
Well, let's talk a little bit about Sarah. So Sarah Winnemucca was actually a Native American woman who lived in Nevada and was part of the Paiute culture, and was a activist and educator of her people, who were the people being the Northern Paiutes. She did a lot of activism to try and improve conditions for Native Americans and promote understanding between Native Americans and white settlers. She was born in 1844 and grew up in a family of leaders in her civilization, and learned to speak English and use that to act as an interpreter for white settlers and government officials, which gave her opportunities to learn more about the settler society and act as a sort of cultural bridge between her people and the Americans who were moving into their territory.
Mm-hmm.
In doing so, because she was more world aware, she saw more of the injustices and abuses that Native Americans were suffering at the hands of settlers and government officials, and became an activist. In doing so, she traveled a lot, gave speeches and wrote letters, and tried to raise awareness about how Native Americans were being treated and their rights. Very based person so far.
Yeah, sounds like it.
And she also worked as an educator. She started a school for Native American children in Nevada, and also in Oregon, founded a boarding school at a certain point. But what's important for this is that she wrote a book called Life Among the Paiutes, Their Wrongs and Claims. It was one of the, and this is an important book because it's actually one of the first published accounts of a Native American life and history written by a Native American woman.
Okay, cool.
And in doing this work, she actually did secure land rights and government aid for Native American people, and did a lot of work to promote the understanding and try to build some respect between Native Americans and white settlers.
Gotcha.
But we're going to talk a little bit about her book, which came out in 1883, does have one section where she's talking about the history of the Paiutes and talks about a small tribe of barbarians who would kill and eat people. They were called the Sitika. Sitika. And she described them as red-haired cannibals that lived in Lovelock Cave.
Okay, very similar. This is the only thing I know about these giants is that they're big, they're cannibals, and they have red hair.
Mm-hmm.
So this is saying red-haired cannibals ticks off two of those three boxes for me.
This is the origin of where all of the discussion about red-haired cannibals comes from.
Oh, okay. So this is it.
Yeah.
I see.
So the Paiute people did have legends about these giants that tell that there was this brutal battle between the Paiutes and the Sitika, which led to their extermination of the giants, apparently trapping them in the cave and setting it ablaze with fire. There's no evidence to support the existence of these giants, and these remains that were mentioned have never been studied by archaeologists.
Oh, okay. So I thought they had them. Well, I thought they had them.
We'll get to that, but basically the thing is that the Sitika is like the scholars who have studied this region believe that the Sitika were either a myth or it is sort of a mythification of a real historical event, i.e. they might have displaced a tribe that lived there and turned them into a story. Though Winnemucca's book actually does mention that she had clothing that had red hair on it that was supposed to be from one of these giants. So that is interesting.
Oh, that is interesting. And has that ever been analyzed?
No, I think I believe it is not survived to modern day. This was, still
1800s.
1800s. So, but despite that, the Sitika have actually become part of the folklore of the American West.
Okay.
Now, here's the bit of the explanation what we can go with. First of all, there have never been any signs of giants seen in Lovelock Cave.
They're so hard to miss.
Yeah.
They are big.
It's true.
By definition, they're very big.
Very big people. But yeah, the researchers in Lovelock Cave have found lots of remains, lots of stuff, and they've come to a couple of conclusions about what could have spawned the giants. And we can talk about that, which is that one, the red hair probably was not red as people think about it. So what happens is that when somebody is buried for hundreds of years, dark hair actually can turn red in like certain sort of situations, certain like levels of pH and stuff like that.
Okay. So just the stuff that's in the ground can turn your hair red over time.
Yeah. A dead body with dark hair that is exposed to certain pH levels does turn red over the centuries.
Gotcha.
Furthermore, a lot of the evidence for cannibalism is only based on a few human bones that have been found in the cave that have been split for marrow. And this is, I'm going to tread very carefully on this subject because the practice of cannibalism amongst Native Americans of the Southwest in ancient times has been a very controversial topic, and probably it requires a more deft touch and more nuanced discussion than one that I have expertise in talking about confidently. But as far as I can tell, there has been debates that like these sorts of things might not represent cannibalism. They might represent, because like usually seeing bones cracked for marrow is a sign that they were eating them, but it also could be a sign of a like some sort of like witchcraft type thing where they were trying to burn witches and they like burnt the bones, they cracked. Also, it could be the result of a situation in which, like, you know, the American Southwest is not exactly the most verdant and lush part of the world. And it could be that there was a situation of survival cannibalism at a certain point, which I feel like nobody would fault anybody for doing.
No.
But again, this is a part where like it deals with a lot of civilizations that are the ancestors of living indigenous nations. And the verdict over whether or not these civilizations practice cannibalism, when accusations of cannibalism have been used by settler colonists to justify the colonization and to demonize groups of indigenous people, has a long history in colonial history.
Yes, we've talked about that before. It's just like sort of a way to make them feel, to make a different group feel like it was okay that we conquered them because they were, look at these brutes eating other people, sort of a thing.
It's either a way to make them seem like they're alien or that they're evil. Accusations of cannibalism are brought up anytime a group is trying to like demonize another group. It usually sticks in there somewhere. And in some cases, it also is either that or it is a grotesque either misinterpretation or sort of uncharitable interpretation of certain funerary practices. Like I believe this was on the island of Borneo, where there was one tribe that lived there had a practice of cremating the dead and then drinking the ashes as a sort of part of their funerary ritual, which, like, you know, is a part of like their culture and all that kind of stuff, but has been, you know, stigmatized as like, oh, it's cannibalism, and like, yeah, I guess, but also it's more complicated than that.
It's complicated.
Yeah, so obviously when you find something like this, you have to tread very carefully. So that's part where that you can speak to with that subject. Furthermore, in these times in the past, and I'm sure that this is a pretty common knowledge. You can tell me if this is common knowledge, but because of different levels of nutrition in the past, people tended to not grow as tall as they do today.
Yeah, I've heard that before. I've heard that people were shorter in the past, like specifically I know in America, that's what I was always taught, that height, overall, like general American height has been growing.
Yes, it has been in general everywhere where there's been better and better nutrition. It's interesting because of some other things, like average body temperature has been decreasing over time because we are not always dealing with low-level infections all the time. But when it comes to height, the diets of people who don't have, you know, industrialized farming can be scarce. especially when you live in a place like, the desert. Even then, like there was depictions of when the Europeans first arrived in the Americas of depicting the Native Americans as being very tall. That was because Native American people ate vegetables. And it's like, and a lot of the people who were like, let's just say that vitamins and minerals were not of the highest priority, and like a lot of not the Europeans didn't eat any vegetables, but their diet was very bread forward.
Yes. Yeah. So comparatively to them, they would be like, whoa, yeah, they're giants. Yeah.
The diet of Native Americans back then was much more varied of meats and vegetables and different types of breads, and like they had a much more healthy diet, so they were a lot taller. And Europeans were like, squat, hairy, like squat, hairy people.
Yeah.
Either ways, that is to say that means that in the past, levels of nutrition and, different genetic factors could lead to there being different average heights amongst different people. And it is possible that the skeletons that were unearthed in Lovelock Cave, there are some depictions of them being very large. And it could be descriptions that cause them to be like, oh, this is the remains of somebody who was like 6'1" in a time where other skeletons in the region might not have gotten much above 5'9".
Mm-hmm.
But by today's standards, like, by like the past standards, I would be a giant as somebody who is like 6 feet tall.
Yeah. Where, I mean, there's even this trend right now. I don't know if you've seen this of limb lengthening.
Oh yeah. It involves like breaking the bones. It's
people want to keep getting taller and taller. But look, we can't give up on our short kings and queens.
No.
And folks. We can't give up on our short folks who we love. Does that mean in past England there was literally short kings and queens?
Probably.
Wow.
Yeah. I mean, people in the past definitely were of heights that were probably like 5'8", 5'9" was pretty much the average height back then.
Nice.
Like there's this whole thing in about how people used to say that Napoleon was short because people called him the little general, which is a misinterpretation because in French you call somebody little if you're like kind of like it's like a term of endearment.
Sure.
So called the little general is sort of like
my little buddy.
Yeah. That they'd be like, yeah, he was only like 5'9", and like 5'9" was like a decent height in the 1800s. So
yeah, that's pretty good.
Yeah. Anyways, that's a big digression to come back to say that another thing that could have been the source of the giant stories is that this is a cave that might have also had fossils of Pleistocene animals in them. Pleistocene animals might have lived in the cave at a certain point in history, and their remains would have also been there. And, the remains of an ancient giant sloth could also, like if you were to find the long bone of a giant sloth, you could interpret that as being part of a human skeleton if you don't have a complete skeleton.
I see. Yeah. It's like similar, but potentially less dramatic than the whole thing about how like elephant skulls look like cyclopses, like giant cyclopses. Mm-hmm. And so people were like, they didn't know if it was an elephant skull. They were just like, it looks like a human skull with one eye.
Yeah. And there was there's a lot of evidence that fossils of megafauna and even like dinosaur fossils and such were misinterpreted as being the remains of giants in the past. So this is not an unheard of thing happening by like to the point where it could have been seen by the ancient Paiute people who then incorporated it as a sort of myth of giants, or it could have been part of the excavation where they found giant bones and wrote about that in their notes, and then people interpreted that as being human bones. There's a lot of different ways that this could have been done. The main problem is that the skeletons that were discovered there were largely disarticulated, which means that like they weren't finding skeletons, they were finding like individual bones.
Yeah, bits and pieces. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And so like that's like the main part about that, and
because that's caused problems in the past with we were just talking about dinosaurs, like that's been a thing with dinosaurs too, where they've just found they used to think that certain bones and like skeletons should have been structured one way, and then found out late, but like because they had to piece it together just based off of like, oh, this is we don't have the whole skeleton, we have bits and pieces, so this is probably what the whole skeleton looks like, and then they find more stuff later that's like, oh, actually we were way wrong. It shouldn't be this way.
Yeah, dinosaur paleontology is a lot of that. Like I remember semi-recent, I feel like this is now a few years ago, but there was like a story about how we thought a whole bunch of different species of ceratopsians actually were all one species. They were just different ages.
Yeah, I remember that too. Where it's like, yeah, this is this dinosaur and here's this other dinosaur. And it's like, actually, they're the same dinosaur. They're just one of them's younger than the other one.
Yeah, it's difficult. It's hard to say. But you see this stuff all the time also in like, not only with like misinterpretation, but like one of the most funny things, and some people have pointed this out, have tagged us on tweets about this, where people will be like, look, there's a sign that there's like giants in ancient Egypt, where they'll show like huge people next to like little people, and everyone's like, children exist.
Yeah. Children exist, and even today, artists sometimes have a hard time drawing children that don't look like just little adults. You know, like there are certain comic book artists who draw children that look like they're 40. You know,
well, if you think about it, like artists have to train so hard on trying to get the human form right, and the human form has like very distinct proportions. And I imagine that most artists, if you're a character artist long enough, that you just get like the human body's proportions just become second nature to you, then to the point where you have to draw somebody who has very different fat distribution and a different body proportion can feel like just like can actually like break your brain and be difficult to do.
Yeah, 100%. So yeah, it happens even today. It for sure happened in the past of people drawing children that look like they need to do their taxes.
Yeah. So this is obvious. This is for different theological reasons, but there's a lot of very old paintings of Jesus where because of the idea that Jesus was perfect, therefore he had to look the same through his entire life. So there's a lot of like, there's a lot of like pictures of like baby Jesus who looks like shredded
with a beard. Oh yeah. Shredded baby Jesus. He has no sins, but he has 12 abs.
Yeah.
Let's go.
It does seem that there's a lot of depictions of Jesus where he did not commit any sins, but man, did he never miss a core exercise.
No.
Just did like 500 crunches a day.
Every time he got tempted, he was like, dude, one squat. Let's go. One squat for every temptation.
It's like up on the cross and has like the whole V going on the hips. Yeah. Okay. That was very sacrilegious. So the thing is that like the Lovelock giant story comes from a lot of like, it could be a lot of different things that don't have to necessarily be the existence of giants. For the record, the picture that is used in Ancient Aliens and is usually brought out by people who talk about Lovelock giants, it shows this like plaster mold of a jaw compared to like this giant jaw. It made me laugh out loud when I was watching this in Ancient Aliens because the plaster mold is not of a jaw, it's of teeth. It's like a bite. It's like a bite, like a sort of bite thing.
Yeah, I'm looking it up. I see. Yeah, it's just the teeth. It's just the teeth.
Yeah, so you can see that like what they're doing, and maybe you can like right click save as. They're showing a mold of somebody's teeth next to like this giant jaw, and you can see that like if you were to put the teeth over top of the other jaw, it wouldn't be that different.
Actually, it would fit. Yeah. So what they're doing, and just to sort of paint a picture better, is they're taking like this the jaw that they found, and then if you can like just the bottom jaw, right? So it's sort of that U shape of a bottom jaw, and then they're taking that and comparing it to what I assume is like a modern day human, just teeth, not full jaw, just bottom row of teeth.
Yeah. That
is like a plaster mold of like something you'd get at like a dentist or something. And they're putting that sort of inside of the U shape of the jaw to sort of compare the two. But like if you just take that plaster mold and you just drag it down a little bit over the actual, they don't align it with the actual teeth of the skull they found, the jaw they found. But if you did that, if you just like grabbed that layer in Photoshop and like brought it down and overlaid it, it would be genuinely pretty much the same. Like size wise, it would be the same size. Like the bottom row of teeth for the giants and then modern day humans looks the same.
Yeah, the way that Ancient Aliens got away with this is they showed this only for like a second so that you didn't think about it too hard. But I saw that and right away I was like, this is right up there with the Piri Reis fade, where like the map that looks nothing like it then fades into the modern map, and you can see like just entire land masses appear and disappear, and it's like it's so similar.
Now some of the individual teeth look bigger, but like I feel like you could chalk that up to just being like some people have different teeth.
Yeah, it's not. It's very amusing about how like it's not that different, and it is like an example of a very dishonest photography to try and compare two things that are not the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, because the jaw, as we're talking about, is the whole jaw. So just in and of itself, it looks bigger because there's more of it versus just just the plaster mold of like the bottom teeth of someone's teeth. Like, it's so, like, I get it. It's effective if you look at it for like a second, but as soon as you start analyzing it and you're like, wait, these are actually like pretty much the same when you think about it. Yeah, that's really funny.
But there's more to uncover, because this is not the only giant that's been discovered in America or around the world. And there's two really big stories of giants that act as sort of the origin story for all of these giant discoveries.
Well, I'd hope they're big stories. They're giants.
Yeah. And these names might sound familiar to you, and I'm surprised it took us this long to get to these on this episode.
Okay.
So the two big ones, the two big stories in giantology is what it's called, are the Cardiff Giant and Piltdown Man.
Cardiff Giant sounds familiar. I don't know Piltdown Man.
Well, let's start with Piltdown Man.
All right.
Piltdown Man was discovered in 1912 in the UK and was touted as being the missing link to human evolution. And at the time, there was like a lot of debate about, evolution versus creationism. And so they're like, look, we found the missing link. It's this skeleton. It's this skull of Piltdown Man.
Mm-hmm.
It was found at this site by two people named Charles Dawson and Arthur Woodward. And but researchers challenged the fragments. And as early as 1913, people were calling it into question. But it wasn't until 1953 it was exposed to be a forgery. The skull was actually basically the teeth of an orangutan mixed with the cranium of a fully developed modern human. So it looked like it had a bigger jaw than it actually had.
Okay.
The main forger of Piltdown Man was Charles Dawson, who was also responsible for doing other archaeological hoaxes at the time.
Oh, no.
The main problem that Piltdown Man has is that it was a hoax that really caused a lot of issues into early research on human evolution. Scientists basically went down a blind alley believing that human brains expanded in size before the jaw adapted to different types of food, which, like, for people who don't know, a lot of our brain size development can come from the fact that we stopped eating a lot of raw food and started cooking a lot. And so, like, a lot of our body's energy did not have to be dedicated to digesting raw food. And so really, the paleo people are the wrongest, because cooking food is actually like the reason why we can develop to be as smart as we are today.
Tristan, we've upset a lot of different people on this podcast by saying things. We cannot upset people who do different diet
raw
people,
food, paleo food,
any diet. It doesn't matter who. Any diet person will have any excuse to be like, to tell you why their diet is the best diet and why every other diet is wrong. And we can't go down that. This is the road I refuse to go down. I can't do this with you. I'm sorry.
Especially because the only healthy diet is the Mediterranean diet. Anyways,
look, all right, we can't.
That's the one that doctors recommend. Anyways, okay.
Basically, what you were saying is basically this forgery of the Piltdown Man had suggested that the exact opposite of what paleontologists and people sort of believed, right?
Yes.
Of this idea of like, oh, I guess we had it backwards because this jaw is so big that maybe we just have to rethink our whole thing. But it was a forgery.
Mm-hmm. Furthermore, the Piltdown Man acts as a case, and we talked about this a lot on this show, but it is a big part of pseudo-archaeology that I think is worth mentioning, which is that race, nationalism, and different sorts of biases can influence scientific and understanding. The Piltdown Man was discovered in the early 1900s, 1912, 2 years before World War I breaks out. Britain was feeling that they were in a time of great conflict, and this showed that, look, the missing link is found in Britain. And this got to the point where the Piltdown Man was even used in evidence in defense of John Scopes during the famous 1925 Scopes monkey trial, which was a trial in the United States that basically legally said that it was okay to teach evolution in school. So this was brought around a lot and used as a proof positive that there was a link between humans and apes and human evolution. So it was used as like proof that evolution happened. And now, because we know it's a hoax, Piltdown Man is often brought up by young Earth creationists as evidence that scientists and paleontologists are actually dishonest and trying to show that humans evolved from apes.
That is so annoying.
Yeah.
That is so annoying. Yeah, all it takes is one thing like this, where it's like, this one thing is a certified hoax, and then it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if we found like a legitimate, and I don't know if we have it, I don't think so, but like if we ever found like a legitimate sort of quote unquote missing link sort of thing that was like verified, people wouldn't care. They'd be like, who's to say this isn't a hoax like the Piltdown Man was?
The missing link topic comes up a lot in Ancient Aliens because they're like, where's the missing link? Like, that's the proof that humans were genetically engineered by aliens. But the thing is, there's a really great bit in Futurama, actually, that sort of explains it, which is like, there's this creationist who's like, look, what's the missing link between this ape and this human? And then it's like, well, it's this one. Okay, then what's the link between apes and this one? It's this one.
Mm-hmm.
And then what's the link? And then like hours pass. And then, okay, so what's the link between this and this? And it's like showing like a perfect spectrum leading from one to the other. And it's like,
exactly. Yeah. There's no, it's like, it's always like a slow gradient. And you're never going to have, and as soon as you find anything, that's exactly right. It's just going to be like, well, how about what's between those two?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So the Piltdown Man was like actively damaging, less damaging, but more probably relevant to the creation of American giants being a thing is what's called the Cardiff Giant, which was this stone man found in the ground in New York, which this one actually has a very funny story to it. So basically two guys, George Hull and his friend. George Hull, I believe, was an atheist, and they were having debates
the way that you said that, I thought you were saying George Hull and his friend George Hull. I'm like,
two George Hulls.
No way.
George's Hull.
George Hulls?
But there, a New York tobacconist named George Hull was debating his friend who was a Christian, and basically said that people will believe anything that's mentioned in the Bible.
He was one of those like cool atheist skeptic YouTubers. I see.
Except that he committed to the bit, and so in order to prove it, he made a fake statue of a giant out of gypsum and stained it with various acids so it would look old, and then buried it on his cousin's farm. Then when workers came to dig a well later, they uncovered the Cardiff Giant, and it became, it was like a huge deal. In the very American tradition, it became then a tourist attraction.
Yep. And that's all I'm seeing. When I searched for it on Google, that's all I'm seeing is like, sort of like this like, it's on a pedestal with like a big sign and like some curtains around it, like, ooh, come see the Cardiff Giant.
Yep. Very, very American. To the point where, if I remember correctly, eventually it ended up in the hands of P.T. Barnum.
I was going to say, on this sign, it says P.T. Barnum offered $150,000 for the giant.
Yes, and he turned it down, and so he made his own.
The most valuable single exhibit in the world today is what this sign says.
Yeah. So P.T. Barnum, if I remember correctly, the story is that P.T. Barnum offered money for it. They said no, so he made his own fake stone giant and started selling it around, which is the most P.T. Barnum move I've ever heard.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
But yeah, the hoax was eventually, and there was also a Simpsons episode that was based on the story of the Cardiff Giant, where as a guerrilla marketing stunt, a mall buries a skeleton that looks like it's an angel, like it looks like it has wing bones.
Oh,
and people start believing in it, and it's like a whole thing. It's a great episode. But yeah, it's sort of based on this story. For all of you people who watched at least 3 Simpsons episodes a day when you were a kid like I was, you'll probably remember that episode.
Wait, so how long between when the Cardiff Giant was originally like buried and between people like when they found it?
I don't actually know. Probably not long.
Not long.
Yeah.
Because you said it was like he tried to make it look older than it was.
Yeah. He was okay.
Gotcha.
So George Hull was deeply attracted to science, especially in the theory of evolution proposed by Charles Darwin. Hull, an atheist, got into an argument with Reverend Turk and his supporters at a Methodist revival meeting about Genesis 6:4, which states that there were giants who once lived on Earth. Being the minority party, Hull lost the argument. Angered by his defeat and the credulity of people, Hull wanted to prove how easily he could fool people with a fake giant.
Wow.
You know what? I appreciate the commitment to this level of pettiness.
That's pretty good.
I unlike the Piltdown Man, which genuinely harmed archaeology, this one I appreciate the bit.
So they dug it up, and then how was it revealed to be fake? Did he come out and say it, or did they just?
Let's find out. Let's go on a journey, shall we?
I'm asking too many questions.
It's fine. It's good. Basically, there were always all the experts were basically skeptical of this.
Yeah.
people believed it was a statue right away. Some men thought it was a giant from Genesis, but the first geologist...
Wait, hold on. I'm sorry. Did people think this wasn't a statue?
No, they thought it was a petrified man from Genesis.
No. No, I'm sorry. I thought that this was just supposed to be like a statue that somebody made to represent. It's not a person. I mean, we know it's not a person, like definitively so, but like that never even crossed my mind. I was like, it's just like a rock, it looks like. And I mean, it's carved to look like or like made to look like a person, but like it never even crossed my mind that it was an actual real life person.
It was the 1860s. But a geologist named John Boyton declared that it was not a fossilized man, but possibly a statue carved by Jesuits in the 16th or 17th century to impress the local Native Americans.
See, like that's where my mind went. I was like, this is just a statue that someone carved of a person for one reason or the other. Like I never even thought that someone would think that this was a real petrified person.
Yeah. Another thing that somebody pointed out was Andrew White, who was the first president of Cornell University, did a close inspection and also pointed out that the place where the workers were instructed to dig a new well made there was no sense. Like the place where the giant was discovered, there was no reason to build a well there. And so he just ordered people to dig a well in this place that made no sense. And then they found this statue, or they found this petrified man.
Sneaky.
Yeah. And
fair enough.
And so like if it, like I say, it's been, people have found out, like there's a lot of people who point out that it was a bit of a bit.
It was a bit of a bit. I mean, it sounds like with both of these examples that you pulled up, it was people who already believed in giants, this idea of giants or something, or just people who already believed in these ideas, like wanting to latch onto something that supported their ideas.
If you want, okay, here's the actual one. So on December 10th, 1869, Hull confessed everything to the press.
Oh, okay.
Which came out of the fact that the other one that P.T. Barnum said, Barnum pointed out that one of the Cardiff Giants was fake because there was two at a certain point. And then he got sued by the person who owned the other one, saying that for saying that it was fake. And so they had to court prove that it was a real man. It's just like,
how do you do that?
If this story could get more American, also it involved people filing lawsuits at each other over whether or not this rock was a person who was petrified.
Oh my God. This has sent me down a rabbit hole that I desperately need to read an entire book about. This is so fun.
Yeah, this one's definitely a lot more fun than Piltdown. But the thing is that, to a point, Hull was right, that people are way more willing to believe in things that they want to believe. And so people who wanted proof that Genesis was real latched on to the fact that, look, there's a giant. And also it was the 1860s. People didn't get as good schooling back then.
Right. They were like, you remember how the Bible said there were giants in New York? Remember how they were like, it's New York. I don't know
what the Book of Mormon.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. The other thing too, though, is that this started a phenomenon in America, and fake giants or claims of there being giants all around is now, and also either dug up from Native American folklore or just made up whole cloth, is all over America. I found examples in Ohio where people misinterpreted a term that people use for people who've lost all of their teeth except for their molars as being a sign of them being giants. West Virginia had myths about there being giants in the area that probably is from people misinterpreting fossils or, pop culture and such. But none of every single time one of these giant bones shows up, it's either a hoax or it's misidentified animal bones. But that hasn't stopped it from becoming part of folklore, and then ancient aliens writing about it as if it's fact. Even in more recent times, a book by the name of Forbidden Archaeology argues that there's human-like beings that lived millions of years ago, and claims that they show that they're giants that challenge our notion about how human evolution worked. Again, without evidence. And also, there's also a subgenre of the flat Earth conspiracy theory that there were giants in the past, and especially to add on to that, giant trees. And they argue that things like Devil's Tower in South Dakota or in Wyoming. I gotta check. I gotta make sure. Somebody from Somebody from one of those states will get mad at me. Wyoming. Yeah. Devil's Tower in Wyoming is actually a giant petrified tree stump instead of being a, rock formation. And so that's a sign that there are giants that were chopping these down. And oftentimes, because it's flat earth circles, they would share around these pictures. And I'm sure everyone has seen like one of these like very obviously photoshopped things of like archaeologists digging up a giant skeleton.
Yep. That shows up on Google when you just search for some of the stuff we've talked about.
Yeah. According to flat earth people, these are the ancient Nephilim from the Bible, which we've already done an episode about. And that all of this is just being suppressed by the Vatican for some reason, because, the Catholic Church is very invested in us not believing that Christianity is legitimate.
Right.
Yeah. And there's this article that sort of analyzes it called The Embarrassing and Alluring Biblical Giant that gives you a lot more juice on it. Furthermore, in our realm of big corporate TV networks doing irresponsible things to promote this kind of pseudoscience, there was a show called Legends of the Lost with Megan Fox, in which the Travel Channel investigated a bunch of mysteries from ancient pasts and talked about a bunch of things that were legitimate, but then veered into the existence of giants or that stones might have healing properties. And it got a lot of like, attention and probably some legitimacy because it's Megan Fox. She's a Hollywood celebrity. How could Hollywood celebrities be wrong? Just look at Gwyneth Paltrow.
Oh boy.
Is that one? Are we allowed to do that one or no?
Oh yeah, we're allowed to do that one. That's fine.
Okay.
I'll allow it.
Apparently Megan Fox wants to find evidence of myth and magic. And so I guess Megan Fox is a real ancient alien head. I don't know.
Who knows?
So and in doing so, apparently this documentary also included like interviews with like legitimate archaeologists and historians, and then juxtaposes it with like, and also maybe giants are real. And it's just like, wait, what?
What?
Yeah. It's all part of pseudo-archaeology. The idea
this is a word we throw out a bunch on this show.
Yeah.
Pseudo-archaeology.
But like, it's one of the many things that show that like pseudo-archaeology has a long pedigree and has a bunch of different motivations for it happening. And some of it is to prove that your religious values are real, or in the case of Piltdown Man, that when evolution was still up for debate, that evolution is real, not relying on it to, prove itself in time, or also like to make it like, British pride. Look, humans evolved in England. Didn't we know that?
Yeah. We got smaller.
Yeah.
And that's how it should be.
The other bit, and this is the part where I do a Tristan, it also is used a lot in various nationalist movements and movements that try to reinterpret history to usually advocate for some sort of racial supremacy agenda. White supremacists use that. So like, I think I've talked about this on the show before, but ancient aliens and pseudo-archaeology and all this kind of stuff in UFOs is really popular with the kind of people who do stuff like attack the Capitol building on January 6, 2021. There's a big crossover in studies of demographic data of people who watch Ancient Aliens, a lot of crossover between that and Fox News consumers, in that you can find examples of this kind of stuff being a problem because it leads to people damaging cultural heritage sites, as we've seen in the show in the past.
Oh yeah.
And also undermine the value of experts and evidence-based things. But you also see examples like a guy named Patrick Schuinow, who wrote a book called Lost Race of the Giants, who started off as just a crank talking about there being giants in the past, but then shifted and focused on promoting that there was this lost giant race that were definitely white and definitely superior and were definitely from Atlantis.
Yep.
And this sold and was really popular with white supremacists. To the point where now Schuinow is known as a well-known white supremacist and has been self-declared as, quote, forever dedicated to the pro-white cause.
So they just want any justification, right? That's really all it is they just want any reason to believe the things they already believe.
Yeah. So you can imagine that, for example, in Lovelock Cave, one of the things that I didn't talk about, but was probably there between the lines, as you know, is that a lot of people latch onto the story to prove that there were white people in the Americas, because there's this long, very racist conspiracy of this like idea that white people came to the Americas before the Native Americans in order to justify the colonization of the Americas.
Yep. And Is this because of the red hair?
Yeah, because of the red hair. Another reason why that it's done is because people will say that like the original text mentions them being white, but it doesn't. But nobody goes and checks the book to actually say so. They just share the same story between each other.
The thing they made up.
Yeah. The other thing too is that the Atlantis story, which fits into this giant story, as I just established, is often used to try to refute the claim, refute the fact really that we see through evidence in the fossil record that humans originally evolved in a region that's around modern day Kenya, and because they want to reject the idea that the first humans were Africans and that Africa is the true birthplace of the human species, they try to find new ways to say, no, well, actually humans evolved in the UK or they evolved in Europe somewhere, so that white people are the original and therefore best humans.
Yeah, that's not great. That's not fun. Something that when I mentioned a couple minutes ago about how there were jokingly saying there are giants in New York, it set something off inside of my brain. We're not sports people, but I was like, that's a sports team,
the New York Giants.
New York Giants.
It was made a pain in the ass to Google this topic, I gotta say.
Because I was gonna say, like, wait, when were they named and what for? Was it because of the rumor of the Giants in New York or whatever? No, it's just because the buildings are tall.
That's less fun.
Yeah, as far as I can tell, that's what I found on my very quick Google search. Anyway, all you sports people who were like, why didn't they mention New York Giants when they were talking about literal giants in New York? This was me doing that. So you have nothing to complain about when you go yell at us over at Probs Not Aliens on Twitter.
Yeah, there's a better
find
twist.
This show.
Yeah.
There it is.
There you can listen. You can find pretty much every podcasting platform and find the one that you like to use. You can add our show to it. You can also find the show on YouTube and also send corrections, questions, death threats, all those kinds of things to our various email inboxes.
Some of those. Yeah. We've got forms for stuff over at probsnotaliens.com.
We have an official
really
death
simple
threats email address, deaththreats@probsnotaliens.com. No,
yeah,
we don't have that.
We don't have that. Maybe if we get enough of them, maybe we'll set one up that just like redirects to just like some sort of junk thing.
The FBI.
Doesn't matter. Yeah, it'll just reroute straight to the FBI. It'll reroute to the CIA.
Because
there
are
CIA
patrons,
plans.
I want to thank the viewers for leaving reviews, the CIA for funding us.
Tristan, where can people find more of your stuff online if they want to hear more of you and your voice?
I have a YouTube channel called Step Back. It's a YouTube channel where I talk about history and why it's very important. Actually, it's very important for understanding the present. I also make videos about creativity and vulnerability and nerdy topics. I recently made a video about YouTube plagiarism.
That sounds like something that I would do.
Yeah.
Over on my YouTube channel, Nerdsync, NERDSYNC, where I made a video about YouTube plagiarism that's popped off. But did you just plagiarize my video?
I was trying to do a bit, yeah.
Wow. I'm gonna copyright strike you and get all your money.
Oh, no, not my money.
How about that? I'm gonna get all your money. It's not a lot of money.
Scott. I'm not going to be able to get my giant hardware store skeleton now.
Oh, and that's really what this podcast was made for, was to fund that. That's the one thing the CIA...
what's it called? A GoFundMe campaign to get a hardware store skeleton.
That's the one thing the CIA is like, we are not going to fund that. That is not a business expense, unfortunately. We'll have links to all of our stuff in the show notes. And thanks to everyone who leaves reviews and tells your friends about the show. As we said, great website to do that is probsnotaliens.com. It's got links to everything. Go check it out. Feedback forums and questions and things like that. So thanks for listening. Until next time, my name is Scott Nicewander.
I'm Tristan Johnson, and the truth is out there. Probably.
I'm gonna have to add like an effect to that to make you sound
reverb.